How you doing? My question has to do with the New Jerusalem. That cube that comes down and lands on the earth. And it's what it's made out of, all these jewels and the foundations and the 12 apostles and all their names are written on it, and streets of gold, and all that. And then it also says in there that no drunkard would enter heaven, right? Well, suppose a guy's in between drunks, he never really gave up. Will he go to heaven? That's another question I had. But getting back to my original question, now when this thing comes down on earth, now we're going to be dwelling there. That's going to be on earth permanently, and we'll have like the original bodies we had in the Garden of Eden before the fall, and we'll be just worshiping God. So, we won't really own anything. Everything will belong to everybody, right? What's your take on that?
All right. Who wants to take that one?
Well, listen, this depends on your view of eschatology and heaven, and there's a lot that goes into this. I would say what I focus on as it relates to heaven is to be absent with the bodies, to be present with the Lord, that I'm going to be in a glorified state at some point in eternity, which is really exciting, that I won't sin anymore, that I'll see loved ones again. And we see about like in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 to 18. I would say that that as far as like what the properties of heaven are going to be like and what all that will entail, it gets difficult. It'll be a place of contentment, it'll be like the party that you never wanted to leave. How great will it be to be in relationships where you won't have resentment, you won't have insecurities. You'll be in perfect comfort, not only in the presence of God, but you'll be in perfect comfort around everybody you interact with. There will be no social anxiety in heaven. There will be no depression in heaven. Jesus says, I go prepare a place for you in John 14, verses 1 to 3. Listen, the place he prepares for us, we're not going to want to leave. We're not going to be like we are on earth, where we're always going from one place to the next place looking for heaven on earth, and we never find it here because it's not here. So I would say, from the standpoint of heaven, what's it going to be like? It's going to be forever. It's going to be sinless. It's going to be relationally perfect. We're going to have such a greater knowledge. It's going to be fulfilling. It's not going to be empty. It's not going to be boring. It's going to be fun. Beyond all that, I don't know. I don't know how to get into the specs.
I think it's awesome that you talked about what it's not going to be, right? And you talked about the relationship between heaven and earth. So I think you could actually... if you just focused on what we're not going to do in heaven, that can kind of give us some insight on what we ought to be doing now, right? So I can think of like 3 or 4 things that we're not going to be doing in heaven. We're not going to have a need for faith because we're going to be in the presence of God.
Tell us the other 2 when we come back from the break. It's a cliffhanger. That's right. I love it.
That's right.
All right, we'll be back with more Bible questions on the Pastor's Perspective program. Bobby Conway and J. Warner Wallace joining me. Stick around. So right before the break, you were talking about 3 things.
Yes, I was saying we're talking about the nature of heaven, and Bobby started by talking about some of the things that are not going to be a problem for us or a reality in heaven. And I think that's, when I see that, I think to myself, okay, that kind of gives us some insight on what we ought to be doing now, because we can't do this later. We can only do this now. And some of those things, I think, well, number one is, like I said before, that we have a need to have faith right now, but we won't have that need in heaven. Right? That's just not going to, we're going to have certainty in heaven. We'll be standing in front of God. We have a need to study, to be approved, and to study to know more about God and know what, but we won't be doing that in heaven. We won't be comforted. We won't need to comfort anyone. We do that now. We have a need for comfort, and we have a need to comfort others. But when we get to heaven, like you said, Bobby, we will have no remorse, but no tear will be wiped from your face. We'll have no need for comfort. And the last thing I think I see is that we won't have any need to reach others. That window will have been closed. So there's 4 things right there that we will not be doing in heaven that really are only available to us right now. Like if we don't do those things right now, that window will close on all those things. So to me, it kind of just speaks to what it gives me a little bit of sense. What we can't do in heaven gives me a sense of what I ought to be doing now.
Yeah, and even our character, I think about like how cool will that be to have our character, like we won't be able to form character in heaven.
Right.
Because we will be glorified. And on earth right now, the instrument by which we form the greatest character is through worship. The Holy Spirit uses that. And so you think about like the way that the world tries to develop character.
Right.
I mean, a Christian who's developing character bereft of worship, we're going about it the wrong way, because as we worship Christ, that forms character in our life. And so, worship vacuous of deepening one's character is vain worship. Our worship should produce character in our life. So it's funny, though, the very thing that is used to produce character in our life, in heaven, we will have perfect character, but we'll still worship.
Well, look at this. Let me give you a slightly different way of thinking about that same thing. Look, how many times do you say your character is shaped? Character is shaped. Well, what shapes anything? I can start with a wooden dowel, but if I want that thing to be a table leg, I'm going to have to find a way to start carving the dowel. And I can either carve it with a chisel or I can carve it with sandpaper, but it's something typically that's painful, that shapes our character. How many times have you seen a football team, right, at the end, or a baseball team, and if they never lost a game, how much character do you think that I always want the team that I'm rooting for to lose a game maybe 2 or 3 games before the playoffs. I want them to understand what it is to have to muscle through a bad game, so they're even better prepared for the playoffs, right? Because they know they can't take anyone for granted. They did that once and they lost, so they've learned from that, and now they are better prepared for the playoffs through the loss. It's like you tell your kids this all the time, right? You don't build character through wins. You build character through losses. That really reveals your character and it gives you an opportunity. This is why I never pray for patience, right? If you pray for patience, what does God give you? A bunch of stuff that tests your patience, right? So character ends up being the stuff that we all value as atheists, character. That's the stuff that God uses. Character is through suffering. Is when character is developed. Courage is through danger. No one is given courage. You develop that as a response to danger. Character as a response to suffering. So
self-control is a result
of testing and temptation. So if God wanted to develop these things in our lives, the things we all value even as atheists, he'd have to create a world in which there is danger and suffering and temptation, because the only way those character attributes will ever emerge is if they are in response to something. So I think it's so powerful about that is that we have to start looking at these opportunities as, so we call it spiritual sandpaper, right? What is that we're talking about? We're talking about these kinds of issues. And so I think, how many times have you met people who are Christians, who have been Christians for a lot longer than me, and now they've been diagnosed with some terrible illness, and you're wondering, well, how can they be that joyous? Well, number one, they understand eternity. But number two, they are seeing the opportunity as a way to be shaped, and their character's being shaped.
Well said.